Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Carbonetic YouTube channel. Martin with Brent here this week again. Always a pleasure to meet with you guys, and thank you for all of you watching. How are you, Brent, today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, I'm good too. Good too. We wanted to discuss this week a little bit more about the Canadian carbon offset market. We've seen, as a reference, we've seen in the United States, Brent, a few months ago, that now they want every American companies to comply actually to have audits made onto their GHG emission. And we're potentially going to see exactly the same thing, happening in Canada as well. So can you give us a little bit more details about what's coming, where we're at regarding, the federal government position, knowing that in BC there's already a very favorable positioning coming from the provincial government. So it's yours. Go on. But what's going to happen next in the carbon Canadian market?
Sure. So just jump back in time, a little bit of history. Countries of the world have been getting together for 30, 40 years to discuss climate change and what they can do to do things different / better. The big one most people have heard of, Paris Accord. Can we limit the increase in temperature on the Earth? They're sort of causing negative things. Some of it is positive benefit. But with industrial emissions sort of getting out of whack, with developing nations pumping a lot of CO2 into the environment, with developed nations, existing economies adding their fair share. So the world got together and sort of said, okay, well, how do we curb this? And out of that, the sort of recommitment was Paris Accord. So can we limit the rise in temperature to a certain amount of degrees by 2030? And that meant cutting industrial emissions. And so how do you do that? Well, basically, the world's countries agreed to mechanisms by which you could understand how much greenhouse gas emissions companies were putting out and what they could do to offset those, perhaps. So Canada launched a system called the OBPS, which is output-based pricing system. And recognizing that other provinces, so BC and Quebec, had already moved past that and had their own systems, and then Alberta as well, called the tier system. So provinces were sort of doing their own things based on what they saw and what they wanted to do. So the feds came in about 2019, and they said, okay, well, we're going to require that facilities that emit over 50,000 metric tons of CO2 or equivalent in various regulated sectors are going to now have to report their emissions. And what we want to do is see them reduce their carbon output, or carbon emissions rather, on an ongoing basis by a certain percentage. And so they sort of said, okay, well, these are the sectors that we're going to cover. We're going to cover oil and gas, minerals, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, iron, steel production, mining and ore processing, fertilizers, so lime, nitrogen, food processing, and then, of course, pulp and paper, automotive, electricity generation, and cement. So kind of a lot of things, right? And the idea is, well, how much can we get these people? What sort of behavioral / corporate change do they need to do? And what is a fair reduction? So what they're balancing, of course, is if we say no emissions, well, you're going to kill industry, you're going to kill jobs, you're going to kill the country's competitiveness. If you start to subsidize those industries because of that, then you could be taxed. You could face tariffs from other countries because there's complex treaties, in with every jurisdiction around the planet, essentially. So very, very complicated. So a lot of thinking has to go into it. So they came up with this output-based pricing system, which is to say, okay, well, we'd like to see, set some goals of, can you reduce by 5%? Can you reduce by 10%? And if you do that, can we come up with a mechanism by which you pay for the added emissions of anything above your allotted amount? And so it's similar to, we think about a simple analogy was before unlimited data on phones, You bought 20 gigs of data, and then if you exceeded that, you had to pay a price for anything above that. So of course we worked really hard to keep our data under 20 gigs. And as Wi-Fi got better, basically we got rid of that stuff and it became unlimited. So think of us right now or pre-2019 as unlimited data. You can use as much as you want. You can be as careless with it as you want. And of course now it's like, no, we want to restrict the amount of data that you use. So be smarter about it. What are the things that you can eliminate? What's the low hanging fruit? And so companies did that. They started to get rid of the things that were really, bad emissions, but they can only get so far. And so that's where we come in. So carbon offsetting really is with companies that have to report their industrial GHG emissions and can only reduce so much. Then they have to pay the Canadian carbon tax, which escalates by $15 a metric ton until it reaches a terminal price of $170 a metric ton of CO2, either offset or avoided.
It's $15 per year, just to be clear. It's $15 per year.
Yeah.
Increase.
So today it sits at 80, I believe. So next year it'll be 95. And every April it goes up, and there's a big backlash and an outcry, and rightly so. Because there's not a lot of clarity as to what the dollars get spent on. So that's a challenge on the political side of things. If we just concentrate on the business side of things, it's going to touch so many different companies. And of course, in our province, in British Columbia, where Carbon Ethic is based and where we're standing up our first projects, it has its own system. But eventually, what should happen is that a carbon credit that a company can offset and elect to use instead of paying that tax bill should be able to be sold, doesn't matter to what type of project, right across the country. And so that's what we're waiting for. And that's really what will create unlimited demand for Carbon Ethics high quality credits. So why would people elect to buy a carbon credit as opposed to pay the tax? It's really simple. And Alberta has a pretty sophisticated compliance market. So if you're Suncor, if you're Husky, if you're Imperial, and you're producing more than you're allotted, and you can only reduce so far. So they're using technological advance and they're using carbon capture. They're doing everything they can, but there's still that balance of accounted for emissions that they have to offset, and they just can't reduce. So they buy offsets. In Alberta, it's called the tier marketplace. And tier credits, they sell at about a 10% discount to the Canadian carbon tax. So that's the incentive, is that you can buy a carbon offset generally for less money. And that's the intent, is that there is a discount built in, and then that allows companies like Carbon Ethic, like carbon capture projects, like our other contemporaries in the marketplace, to be able to solicit funds from third-party companies who actually need this process. Why would you buy that instead of paying the tax? It's number one, the discount. And number two, we think, where would you want to spend your money? Would you want to send it on to Ottawa into a nebulous system where really there's not necessarily the most accountability or transparency in terms of what your dollar is going to? Or do you want to send it to a company like Carbon Ethic that has a transparent business model and that goes to improve forests, which are the lungs of the world? And we give them all the data, the information, access to our proprietary technology to demonstrate the commitment they've made to our partners, to us, and to the environment. So we think that's an easy sales pitch. It's a better product for less money. I mean, how can you say no?
Yeah, and actually, you really have results regarding forest management. Because once again, as you said a few minutes ago, the issue is that when the government is questioned regarding, okay, well, these monies that comes from the carbon tax, where did they go? And we're still waiting for an answer, right? So there's a lack of transparency regarding where these taxes goes to. If there's a real fundamental, I would say, benefit to the environmental conditions, that that is left, to be seen, where if the people buy carbon offsets and these offsets are transparent, we can see actually the revenue sharings with the indigenous partners. We see that there's also forest operations going and improvements being made. That's a big difference, because now we have a tool which allows us to invest in the forest, which is sadly not being really taken care of for the last few years, right?
Yeah, exactly. So in BC, there's been some changes. So the initial regulation in British Columbia was something called the CIIP, which was run. It was basically the Clean BC Industrial Incentive Program. And what that was to encourage polluters to change their behavior, and that there would be some incentive for them to do that. So if they displaced the emissions of some GHG, they actually had a mechanism by which they could get paid for that behavioral change. So similar to when we're raising children, how we use a reward system for certain things, we use a punishment system for other things. So the government thought, rather than be punitive right off the start, let's just see if we can create positive change. And that was largely successful. Now we're getting a little bit more mature, because that was back in 2008, and we're transitioning to this output-based pricing system, which really does mean if I'm able to reduce my carbon emissions to under that recording level, then I can sell those credits to other folks, or companies like Carbon Ethic, who purely generate carbon credits, can sell into that marketplace, trying to create sort of harmony between buyers and sellers. And then the pricing guidance does come from that federal system, where there's a backstop price of carbon. So if you fail to change your behavior, you'll be faced with that tax, and we know what that tax is going to be. So the OBPS system, it provides a specific emissions limit target, and anything you exceed, you would pay in tax. It's not eliminate all emissions; it's reduce a percentage of emissions. And so there's a formula which is basically emissions limit per product, which is equal to annual production times the reduction factor, right? So what I'm polluting today or emitting today, times how much we want to see the deduction, times a production weighted average emission intensity. So another factor to sort of come up with a reasonable number that companies can target. The reduction factor is different for industries. So generally, they're looking for that 65% for most products, but it's higher. So there's for copper mining, it's 80%, 85% for zinc lead smelting, 90% for cement, chemical processing, lime products, and 95% for aluminum smelting. So what they're saying is, if you can do a 5% behavioral change, we know that aluminum smelting, because we have technical advisors in the government, is very hard to change, right? It's a tried and true process. There's not a lot of things they can do, but whatever you can do, please, by all means. Whereas a lot of other industries, we've just never even scratched the surface of what's achievable until we really dig into it. So that's really the goal is tightening those processes. And every year they're going to tighten the process by 1%, except for industrial emissions, who have a 0% tightening rate. Effectively, they just can't do anything.
Yeah.
Of course, we're a complicated society. We need hydrocarbons to power our economy. Everything we touch, taste, feel, and see has something to do with the petrochemical. So it's not like we can just eliminate all emissions. That's just silly. And it's silly talk when people go down that road. But what we can do is make meaningful incremental changes along the way that lead to a massive result in the future.
So, one last question before we end the video, Brent, because I think that it opens up a pretty interesting fact. So we tend to say in the carbon offset industry that, Europe has been, as regulators, they've been the leaders. But also it might be a little bit easier for Europeans, to be leaders in the carbon offset markets because their economy is not based on commodities. So you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
My question to you is: we know that countries like Australia, countries like Canada, are raw materials producers, miners, oil and gas sector. Like we deliver to the world a lot of the minerals. A lot actually of these raw materials are coming from Canada and Australia and other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider that still the government and the regulated bodies are pretty good leaders in the sector, knowing that actually we are a commodities market country?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I'll jump out and say that Canada often gets a bad rap because of our emissions per capita in our country. And a lot of people like to talk about that while not looking at their own behavior. And I think what people sort of misunderstand about Canada is that we're a vast country. So second largest by landmass in the world, 3 coasts, Pacific, Arctic, and Atlantic. But most of the population of Canada is a thin band around the 49th parallel, and most people live within 100 kilometers of that zone. And the rest of Canada is quite cold. And so we're a colder northern country. So we require a lot more heat than, say, a warmer place like any equatorial country. We require a lot more transportation fuels because our goods are so spread out. So, to drive, and you've done this, to drive from your former hometown of Montreal to your current hometown of Kelowna, any sane person would probably take a week to do that drive. Whereas in Europe, I can hop on a train from Geneva and end up in London, inside of an afternoon, essentially.
Yeah.
So huge populations, small countries, and that's what's underestimated about Canada, is that we are a vast country with a very small population. And of course, when goods arrive from China, Korea, Japan at the port of Vancouver or the port of Prince Rupert, and they're destined for, let's say, Winnipeg, that means they're going to have to go on a 35 to 4,000 kilometer road journey, or perhaps into Ontario via train or truck or some mode of transportation. There's just a lot more GHG emissions built in to being a small population, large landmass northern country. Now, if we combine that with the fact that Canada's actually got a fairly diversified economy, but we have great natural resources and we've got a lot of innovation. So we're producing some of the cleanest oil and gas on the planet, and certainly some of the most ethical, where these are high-paying jobs that supports our high tax regime. It supports healthcare and education, and it allows people to make a fantastic living. It allows university research and all the technological iterations that have been developed in Canada, things like hydrofracking, in order to unlock more oil and gas potential from a single drill site as opposed to many drill sites. So there's innovations like that occur, as well as our technological innovation, our commitment to tourism, our commitment to sustainable forestry, to right-sizing our fishing industries, and then of course our massive agricultural production that relies on fertilizer. So Canada has a lot of things that are ethical and stable to offer the world. You think about our potash production, which was easily able to take up the slack from jurisdictions like Russia and Ukraine when they began their conflict over 2 years ago. So the world is able to continue to receive beneficial commodities from Canada without the risk of a Venezuela type collapse, or a bad actor deciding that they don't want to deal with nations that are G7 or friendly to us. And so we have that stability built in, but oftentimes people mischaracterize Canada's per capita emissions because they leave out, obviously, the meat, and they concentrate on the soundbite instead.
Yeah, it makes sense. And as you said, there's so much distance to cover, and a lot of these commodities are coming from far away from where the people are located. I mean, as population living. And yeah, so it needs to travel either by train, by semi trucks, or airplanes. So of course now you see how Canada is a big country, and delivering all of these resources.
Well,
So,
and just to put a point on your question, which is the government doing a good job? They're grappling with these factors. You start making change by implementing policy. I think the governments recognize their policies aren't perfect.
mhm.
We expect there could be some type of government change next year with a more conservative based government that is going to have to grapple with these same challenges as well. We're trying to work inside the system that we're given. In British Columbia, we've got a good handle on how that works. And we do see British Columbia leading the way in terms of making sure that some of the monies generated from carbon offset production, from the carbon tax that's collected going into industries. So we've seen companies like Tidewater Renewables receive massive amounts of funding to be able to renew oil and in a different way. And all the technological investment that's been done in the gas industry and coming up with really clean, state-of-the-art LNG facilities. So there is some good stuff going on, and of course, it's always easy to throw stones at the federal government because it is such a behemoth. But we still work under our same model, which is we can do things different / better. And there's always room for improvement. And we're here to support companies that do have unreducible carbon footprints with ethical, transformative, high quality projects that are transparent, trustworthy, and reliable. And you can count us to be here for the long haul. Because we have that commitment, and of course with our Indigenous partners who are the true stewards of the land, that's where it really works, and that's why we make a product that people will want, and ultimately the market will support.
Quick word regarding of the International Day of Indigenous coming on Friday.
Yeah, super excited. So I think we're planning on celebrating with our friends at Hybra First Nation. So we were extended an invitation from Cookpee, which is another word for chief in their traditional language. So Cookpee Jamie Fletcher has invited Carbon Ethic to attend the celebration in Clinton, BC. So we'll be celebrating with the people on the unceded ancestral lands of Hybra First Nation. So really excited.
Really excited to be there too with you, Brent. It's going to be a beautiful day, preparing for the next weekend as well. So thanks again for your time, Brent. Always appreciated. So many good informations that I wish that the people find that are interesting. And by the way, thanks to our viewers. Give us a like if you appreciate. Please share the video with your friends and family. Always appreciate it as well. So thanks again. Have a great week, everyone, and see you next week. Thank you for watching this video. If you care about the forest as much as we do, please subscribe to our different channels and stay put for the next one.